To be honest, I actually don't think you should major in cybersecurity if you're an undergrad. When I first came in, that's the first internship I got paid nothing. It had to be less than minimum wage. I hear certifications get a lot of heat, and I just want to say they're important. They're super important. You should get them. You should study for them.
In today's episode, we have Felipe, who is a cybersecurity engineer at Chubb, which is a global insurance company. Welcome to the show, Felipe.
Hey, Felix, great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, so before your current career, and I guess you're also still doing this, but before you became a cybersecurity engineer, you worked primarily as a music director, piano teacher. What motivated this change into becoming a cybersecurity engineer?
Yeah, and you're right. I still am doing it. So I still am doing music and balancing both cyber and music. I just didn't want to depend on music for any sort of income. Like I wanted to take in whatever students I wanted to be really kind of picky about my student base, which you can't do if you're running a business on it. You got to get the numbers high, get as many people in as you possibly can. And I didn't want to do that. Like I wanted to only work with the people that I wanted to work with. I wanted to take only the gigs that I wanted to get. And so I needed to rely on something else for income. And I just did my research and it seemed like cybersecurity was the best match. And so I ended up going with cybersecurity and it was a great choice. Spoiler alert, it was a really, really fantastic choice. I was so happy I did it because I get to work in something that I love, that's really interesting, that really captures me. And it also gives me the freedom to pursue music exactly how I want, when I want.
Yeah, this is really interesting that you didn't have your eyes only set on cybersecurity from the beginning. You went through this investigative period where you had criteria or questions you had wanted to answer to figure out what's the right career moving forward. I would love to hear what some of the big ones are, because I think a lot of people out there might be kind of in this fork in the road where they're thinking, choosing between a few options, or maybe cybersecurity is not even on their mind, but maybe they have similar criteria that you had. So tell us more about what you were looking for in the next career.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I knew I had to do something that I would love, even if it was going to be something I did alongside another thing, my music thing. I knew it was something that I had to love. And so there were also practical limitations. Like I knew I wasn't going to go back to school for 4 years to start another career. So I looked up things at certificates that wouldn't need the 4 year college degree. And practically speaking, I thought, well, I think I can do anything. So I'm going to just pick whatever pays the best. And so I looked at what are the highest paying certifications. And it turns out that it's petroleum engineering, cybersecurity, or cloud administration. So I looked into all three and cybersecurity was the best match. So it was good. It was like a really practical choice. I didn't have to go back to college. I knew that there were promising career paths ahead of me if I went down that way. And I knew that the job role, the duties, the kind of things that you have to do really matched my personality.
Yeah, I mean, petroleum engineering sounds very different than the other two options that you settled on. So yeah, certificates seem to be a popular way for people to invest in this career. Tell me more about like why are certificates important? Like, what about cybersecurity makes the emphasis on getting certificates rather than like a traditional 4 year degree approach to getting into the field?
There's like two ways of like trying to talk about that. One, historically speaking, cybersecurity is something that started with from hobbyists. Like it wasn't like a professional career the way that being a lawyer or being a doctor was, right? So it's not something you would necessarily go to school for first. It was hackers or people who tried to break into computer systems. Hackers are people who tinkered around with some of those systems and figured out how to break them, how to get into them. So it's something that people did outside of the academic world, right? So certifications are some things that really emphasize those hard skills, that knowledge of how to get something done, as opposed to having like a pedigree or being accredited by some sort of academic body. So that's one aspect to it. Why certifications are such a big deal in cybersecurity, because really you just need to have a hard skill and be able to get something done. And so certifications test that. It's interesting. I think that but within the world of security, like I think certifications can really divide people. Like some people think that certifications aren't really that valuable, or that it actually is for the same reasons that I just mentioned, that really what matters is the hard skill and whether you can get the job done or not.
Yeah, that's a good point that the whether you can do the job or not is like the main thing. But do you find that having a certificate explains that hey, I can do it because I have a certificate? Did you find that when you go out for job, the employers will say, okay, since he has a certificate, he must know how to do this. Do you find that that's the leap that they take, or is there more to it?
There's more to it. There's more to it. So I think my position is that certificates are essential. You absolutely need them. They get you through the firewall, they get the attention raised, and you need some sort of attention, you need some sort of distinguishing factor. So they're absolutely necessary, but not all certs are created equal. So some certs don't necessarily test if you can really, really get the job done. I mean, so you mentioned in the pre-interview that you're a software developer. Surely you must feel the same way about some of the software development. I don't know if they have certifications in that field.
Yeah.
Well, if it,
Yeah, not much certification, but yeah, that was the main reason I bring it up because it matter. Like you're saying, it matters if you can do the job or not. Not your pedigree, not where you got your degree from. I mean, certainly some companies will target certain schools to hire from, but we don't have this concept of a certificate that proves that I do something, which I think would kind of help a little bit at least to get your foot in the door. That hey, there's already somebody that can vouch for me. So speaking of that process, like when it's not like you just go and get a certificate. You have to study for it. There's testing for it. Tell us more about like what's that like preparation process? Like how do you prepare for it? What's the test like? Like walk us through that.
if I were to generalize, I think that there's plenty of study material out there for, let's say, the CompTIA certs. If you get a vendor specific cert, like a Microsoft cert, they also have plenty of pre-made certification material, like study material. So definitely get all of those. And once you have them, I think the best way to study them is through Anki flashcards and mind maps. I think those two tools, you got everything you need to basically pass.
Yeah, and I don't know too much about certifications, but is there like a pretty, I guess, a well agreed upon list of like what are the main ones to get, or is it still kind of controversial about which ones make sense to get and not to get?
It depends. It depends. It's such a wild, big, sprawling sort of like field of possible certifications you can get. So it really just depends on what you're trying to do. I think going broad first is important, like Security Plus. If you're just trying to get in, you should get that. I think Network Plus is often overlooked, but if you have a solid grasp of networking, it will go so far in terms of what you could do as a SOC analyst, for example, which is generally like a pretty common first entry level position in cybersecurity.
Maybe you can tell us more about like what is cybersecurity at like a 50,000 foot view, and maybe what are some of the common roles or job functions under that umbrella.
So I would say it's just protecting the systems. Right? That's the bottom line. That's what you have to do in cybersecurity. You have to protect the systems, the information, the whole, the network that's used to communicate, that those systems used to communicate. I guess a more formal definition would be it has to do with the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And you have to defend those three things. And that's the mission of cybersecurity. So in order to do that, you've got different roles. You've got more rules like GRC that are policy based, that are compliance, regulation. It certainly helps to be technical, but the level of technical knowledge that you have to have for those roles is not as deep as the roles in our like security engineering or SOC analyst. So there's different ways, both technical and not so technical, that you accomplish the mission of the CIA triad.
Are there common misconceptions that you hear from people about what people that work in cybersecurity actually do?
One common misconception is that you have to be all super technical to work in cyber. And that's just not true. You do have to have technical knowledge, but I don't think you have to have in-depth, hands-on experience with every little nook and cranny of a computer to perform a very valuable function in cybersecurity. Like, for example, you could be someone who knows a lot about computers and the processes without having the hands-on knowledge. And you could have a brilliant mind for processes, systems, how things work within a company. And you could fulfill one of those non-technical roles in a cybersecurity branch of an organization, just helping out with some of the policy work, not just external compliance sort of policy, but also even internal, all the intricate sort of like things that have to go on in a company.
I'm curious about so you didn't take the, quote unquote traditional path into a tech career where you went to like a 4 year college for it. What are your thoughts on programs that like college programs, 4 year programs that specialize in cybersecurity?
Yeah. To be honest, I actually don't think you should major in cybersecurity if you're an undergrad. I think you should major in computer science to maybe get an understanding of computers, how they work, or any major that's going to like really teach you how to code. The program that I'm going through right now is the master's at SANS, and that's just got a lot of like practical knowledge for how to lead a program, how to architect a security stack for like a company, how to do these big things. But your first job is not going to be that. Your first job is going to be really practical. And so instead of that kind of knowledge, if you can code, you're leaps and bounds ahead of other people. So really learning how to, picking a major that's going to teach you how to code and it's going to teach you about computers is much better than a cybersecurity major when you're first starting.
So you mentioned that before you got your current job at Chubb, you had internships before that. And tell us more about what that job market is like. 'Cause I think it might be different depending on what kind of tech, what kind of job you have in tech, whether internships and entry level cybersecurity roles, are they a thing? What's the job market like there?
I don't know what the job market is like for internships and entry levels. And I don't think you should concern yourself with that really. I think what you should concern yourself with, anybody who wants to get in, is with building relationships because there's always relationships to be had. There's always people who have a need. There's always people who have a problem that need to be solved. There's always work to go around. So it's just about finding the people who have that work and building a relationship with them. And that's going to be constant regardless of the market or how many positions there are available or not. So one of the biggest things that the bootcamp did for me, I would say the biggest thing, was that it helped me build those relationships. It put me in contact with people who had that kind of work. And then what I did was the way I got the first internship position was he was one of the professors at the bootcamp.
Yeah, actually, let's
And
talk about that 'cause I think we haven't even mentioned that you went through boot camp first, but like maybe we'll talk about that first. Like, what was the boot camp you went to? Like, what was the experience like? Yeah, and tell us more about how you transitioned into a job offer after the boot camp.
so the bootcamp was Flatiron, and I picked it because they had the best student results and they also had some good comments on Reddit and different open platforms. And so I trusted that. I saved up a good amount of money to go to Flatiron with the music gigs. And my actual time at Flatiron, it was good. It wasn't smooth sailing at all. It was difficult. I was new to a lot of the material, so it was tough. You definitely go through a lot of imposter syndrome. Um, there was like a dramatic thing with one of the professors. And so it was a bit of a mess. But at the end of the day, the important thing was the knowledge content that I was going to learn and the experience from the labs. And as long as I got that, I was sticking to it and we were good to go. And I did get that. Also, the other big thing is just being in contact with the right people. They had a very strong career mentor, basically someone who guides you along the process after you graduated. So they did a great job of putting me in touch with the right people. They took care of the essentials.
So you got put in contact with with a company, or like how did you actually get that first internship? Like, what was that process like?
Well, so the first internship wasn't actually through the career mentor guy, even though he was great and he helped position a lot of other people in the cohort. But the first internship was through a professor. He owned his own MSSP, his own company, and he needed to hire an analyst engineer. And so I did really well on his labs. I tried to impress him as much as possible, tried to show him that I could solve his issues, built that relationship, and he ended up hiring me. And that was the first internship. And it was that first internship that gave me, since it was such a small company, it was just the company that he owned. It gave me tons of technical experience, tons of hands-on experience, hands-on experience, excuse me, with things that would have taken me years to get otherwise. And so that really helped a lot. And that was what let me get into Chubb later on.
What's the job interview like for someone that works in cybersecurity?
Well, it depends on the role. Like I said, I think it's hard to generalize. If you're looking for a job and you're just starting out, you want to be as specific as possible about the people you reach out to and the relationships you want to build. And so because of that, really the interview process is going to be kind of based on the relationship that you built with the person. So with that first internship, the guy really needed someone who was very good with Elasticsearch, the Elk stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana. And so I had tons of lab work prepared with the Elk stack, and I could show him that I could do exactly what he needed to be done. And so my preparation process for that interview was just building out an Elk lab environment, showing that I could do it and being as knowledgeable as possible about Elk. And that was enough for him. And those were fairly generic. I feel like those are things that you could prepare for just by Googling like SOC analyst interview questions, basic authentication protocols, networking protocols, what you would do in certain scenarios where you've got like an endpoint that might be infected with malware.
Like
Yeah.
it's relatively like standardized.
For
I need to
those, yeah.
Yeah, and then one of the things I'm hearing from you too is that there's like constant learning, like new certificates, new technology that you always have to learn about. So there's a real constant pressure of like information overload in cybersecurity, which you've told us that you find both hard but also really enjoyable. So tell us more about your strategy to stay up to date, but also not like kind of overwhelm yourself.
Yeah, you have to be so good with information overload. Like, if you get information overload easily, this is not this career path. But I mean, I've been training nonstop, taking multiple certifications every year since I started. I think at this point, like 4 years ago. And I still have, in my mind, I have another 5 years of training before I'm done. So, like, it's a lot. It is nonstop. And having protected time to study, to develop your training in some way has got to be like a daily part of your routine. And you have to be able to see that be a part of your daily routine for like the next 10 years. Yeah, to really get in. What are some of the techniques I use? Find something you really love and pace yourself. So like I found that I really thought Sims were great, were super interesting, like pieces of technology. They were really complicated. They tried to solve a really interesting use case. I thought, wow, well, this is something I really want to learn how this thing works. And so I could foresee the next several months of my life being just absorbed by Sims. How do they work? How are they used? The second thing is pacing yourself because you can't boil the ocean at once. So like pick something, pick something you can specialize in. So I picked Sims. Once I built like I had enough knowledge about Sims to deal with them in any case, in any scenario. I moved up to cloud, and now cloud is sort of the thing that I'm totally obsessed about. I can see how after this, I'm going to really delve into DevSecOps and AppSec, and then I'll look in. So I'm kind of pacing myself. I'm going specialization at a time. Yeah, but definitely pick something that is not going to be a drag because you're not going to endure a 10-year sprint if it's a drag.
You mentioned earlier that you made this change because you don't want to be locked into having to grow volumes of different clients that you work with. You wanted to kind of be pick and choose. Tell us more about how that's evolved over time. Like, what's the income trajectory that you're at today that allows you to be more picky about the kind of jobs that you take as a music director?
When I first came in, that's the first internship, it was like, peanuts. Like I got paid nothing. It had to be less than minimum wage. So that was a hard bullet to bite, but it was only like 3, 4 months. And I had some money saved up from my music career. And then after that, I think it was really quick. I came at like 60 or 75 for my very first entry level role. I think that's not bad for the very first role. It also depends on where you live. And then I think I broke 6 figures 3 years in or 2 years in. And then after that, at that point, you've got experience and you're specialized. And so they keep rewarding you for gaining more expertise in your area of specialty. Yeah, it's good. It's a good role.
Yeah.
It's worked out. I essentially don't use any of my music money anymore. I still make it, but I don't use it. I don't depend on it. Yeah.
That's amazing. So it sounds like at first it was a hard pill to swallow, but you had an inkling where you knew that it'd be worthwhile. Tell us about what it felt like at these different inflection points. Like maybe even though the internship didn't pay much, like it was still your first time getting paid in this new career. And then maybe your very first job where you went from an intern to like a full-time employee. Like, do you remember getting those offers or like getting that first paycheck? Like, how did you feel?
How, how did I feel? I felt good. I felt good. Of course, who doesn't like to get paid? I don't mean to, be unemotional or something, but I feel like you know, if you're gonna you have the long term insight, you got to do something that that you really love, that you really enjoy. So I think the moments of greatest joy I remember were feeling like I really mastered or learned a new piece of tech, language, or a peer that I really respected gave me a nod, like hey, good job, you show some technical expertise here, and then that stuff inevitably leads to the big pay and the good career paths and the good prospects. But yeah, I think focusing on the tech, on the craftsmanship, and on relationships are really where the satisfaction comes in and where a good career can come from.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to undersell that too, because I think anyone that enters a new career, especially after you've already had another career before this, the imposter syndrome is very real. Where you're thinking like, do I belong here or not? But then hearing someone kind of give you props for your ability to do something in this field can definitely it kind of puts you on top of the world where you feel validated that, hey, you actually know you're in the right place. You're not, you actually belong. So tell us more about that. Like, were there certain points that you felt like, okay, now I don't think the imposter syndrome ever completely goes away, but were there certain points where you're like, yes, I am actually a cybersecurity engineer. Like am working in this field. This is why I'm a professional in this field. Do you remember times where you felt that?
Yeah, yeah, there were a few times. I remember when I maybe I'll like point out 3 different times, when I was first learning about SIMs and it's one thing to set up a SIM in your lab environment, but I think the very, very first time that I was setting up our deploying our SIM for one of our clients
And
and the
maybe you can
internship that
pause
I
here
had.
for a second, like and break down the SIM acronym. Like, what does it mean? Like, what is it? How does it actually? How do you actually use it?
Yeah, so SIM Security Information Event Manager. And so essentially it's like you can send all of your whatever logs you have in your system, you can send over to the SIM and then you can run analytics over that data. You can search the data, you can run analytics through the data to produce alerts. And that's really at the most basic, quickest way I can describe the SIM. Basically, I remember the first time that I successfully deployed the SIM to one of our clients and then I saw their logs started streaming in. And it felt great. It just felt great going through the trouble of aligning all of those different pieces of technology that are required to make the same work. It was really fantastic to see the logs coming in. It felt like magic, to be honest. And then afterwards, it was like log maintenance, and so getting to see the logs populating consistently, and that the data was clean, that the data was usable. So that was one moment. And then another moment was when I started building out some automations and tools. This was now at Chubb, but when I started building automations and tools for the team to use when they actually use it, and you can see that the tools you build are useful for the team and save time. That was a huge moment of validation. And maybe the last one was just getting invited by someone that I really respect to be an admin on the developer console. So we have a platform where we develop security tools, and getting invited by this very senior person who I respect to be an admin on that platform was like great. It was like a
Yeah,
huge nod, and that meant a lot.
yeah. They
If
definitely feel like they trust you at that point. They give you that kind of like power. Put in your hands is awesome. So I'll leave you this last question. Then, what do you think is like your hottest take on the cybersecurity career path?
I would say maybe 2 things. The first thing is not so much a hot take as it is that like, I feel like a mindset, but I think resilience is more important than security. I think if you look up what Sunil Yu, Kelly Shortridge, those are 2 very, very important or prominent, I don't know how to put them, but they're great security people, and I followed their thoughts on some of this. Have to say th- they make a really good point that security is inherently fragile. And what you want to shoot for is resilience. I'm going to leave it at that. Maybe one last thing I'll throw out there is Nicholas Nassim Taleb, and he wrote Anti-Fragile. And I think what Sunil and Kelly mean by resilient is really anti-fragile. Like anti-fragility is more important than security. I'll let listeners Google. The other thing is just going back to the certification conversation we had earlier today. I hear certifications get a lot of heat, and I just want to say they're important. They're super important. You should get them. You should study for them. They don't negate experience and having lab work. They're certainly not good in lieu of experience in lab work, but they're important, and that you should do both certifications and the lab work.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is that it's not enough, but it is a almost a requirement. It's a prerequisite to actually
Yeah.
be able to stand out and get the job and do the job. So thank you so much for coming on, Felipe, and thank you for sharing your journey, your advice, and experience with us.
Hey, no problem. Get to meet you, Felix.